technology. Focus on Liberia uncovers and showcases the best of Liberia and shows the world the truth about Liberia. We educate, elevate, and promote all things Liberia. We conduct interviews, panel discussions, debates, and more. Tune in to Focus on Liberia on Facebook and YouTube and be a part of the stories that make up the news.
This is Focus on Liberia, and I am Dennis Ja.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another session of Focus on Liberia on the Marketplace, where we talk everything business, finance, and economics. Focus on Liberia. We talk about everything that elevates Liberia, promotes Liberia, and everything Liberia. I am your host, Gabriel Carter. I am in the studio with my co-host today, Larry Kennedy. Larry, welcome again.
Gabriel, so nice to be here on a Saturday, man.
Yeah.
So much happened over the past week. We do have a lot to unpack. So, hi to other two people out there in Liberia.
Yeah.
This is not my normal thing, but every now and then I like to dive into some finance, politics, and some economic topics. So we're here. We have a lot to unpack this week. We're trying to bring you guys up to speed and offer some insights into what's been happening.
Yeah, and I can see that you're ready. You came ready today. I see the preppiness, the kosu,
came ready to do battle, bro.
the gloves are off, so
right.
it's good to see you in that position. I like it when you're in that kind of position, ready to just go, no bare knuckles, So, for the audience, wherever you are, please share the show. Take your time, join us. We're going to be here for another hour and a half. Hopefully, we'll cover every topic for within an hour and a half time that we have. But as we always say, bring your comments, bring your questions. We always tap into the comments later on sometime in the show. So feel free to join us, grab a cup of tea, water, or wherever you are, sit down and just take these things apart bit by bit. So let's get into what we're going to cover today for the show. So the first topic on our list is going to be the LBDI insolvency the borrower list. I think you guys have heard about this and the financial scandal that evolves around that. The second thing we're going to be talking about today is the MCC Compact scorecard, 5 years without a compact agreement. And I think we've all heard about that, so we're going to dissect that and go into that and look at it from, like we said, every economic standpoint. Third on our list is the current U.S. and Africa Leaders Summit and its monetary outcome. Did we get anything? Did we go, begging with our hands out, but we didn't get anything? Or did they just pat us on the back and tell you, see us later? We're gonna talk about that. The fourth thing, and I think is the last thing on our list today, is are the sanctions having any economic impact? We've had the sanction. We had those three politicians who were sanctioned. Now we want to talk about, since then, what were the economic impact on the country? Where are those guys so far? Are we even looking at to even go after them to get reimbursed for some of the money that was stolen? So those are the four items we're going to be talking about today. And as we always say, I have no other expert in the studio but somebody who is very credible to talk about this thing today, my co-host Larry. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. So as we go along, Larry, I'm sure you've heard about this. The first thing on our list today, the LBDI insolvency and the borrowing list, the scandals. You have 30 years of financial background working at some of the nation's biggest bank. You currently work at one of the biggest state institutions right now. So when you read about this thing, what was your gut reaction, and what did you think as you continue to follow along the story as it unfolds with this whole scandal that surrounds the LBDI?
Gabe, and first, let me say hi to Liz Appleton and Ruth. I see you smiling. It's better to always smile than to cry. So welcome. And my good friend and brother, Manny Jackson, welcome. And everyone else out there, if you want us to give you a shout out, please feel free to post a comment, say hello to us. We'll send the love right back to you. So here's the thing. In the banking sector, banks do fail. Banks do become insolvent, which means their liabilities are far more than their assets.
Yeah.
That happens all the time in the US. In fact, because I teach a data analysis class, one of the data banks that we tap into is on a website called data.gov. So if
Yep.
you go in there and you search failed banks, FDIC, it will give you the listing of all the failed banks here in the US. Banks do fail. And the reason they fail is sometimes it has to do with bad lending practices, right? Uh, those practices are what we're seeing happening in Liberia.
Mhm.
The reason why I would be concerned if I'm in Liberia, because I want to put my money in the bank, is
Mhm.
because bank has a responsibility. If
Mhm.
I do share responsibility, which means
Mhm.
they have an obligation that when I put my money in that bank,
Mhm.
it should be there. So when I come back to withdraw it, I should be able to gain access to it.
Yeah.
Now, banks make money by lending the money that you deposit to someone else.
All right.
But when they're lending your money, Gabriel, or if they're lending Liz's money or Emmanuel Jackson's money
Mhm.
to their friends and family with no intention of paying it back,
Yeah.
that's when you run into a problem. And this is why you run into something that we all seen, Manny, Gabriel, you've seen this, where they play like a Ponzi scheme.
Yeah.
You know, in Liberia, we call it robbing Peter to pay Paul. You put your money in there, you come the next day, you can't gain access to it.
Yeah.
Why? Because the person they've loaned it to not able to pay it back.
Right.
So now they're waiting for new deposits. In order to take that new deposit, it's
Yeah.
the old-fashioned what's his name? Wilfredo Ponzi.
Yeah.
That's the scheme.
Yeah.
But eventually all Ponzi schemes tend to collapse. They
Yep.
all tend to collapse. So when I saw that list, to answer your question, when I saw the list, I
Yeah.
was concerned.
Yeah.
I'm saying, man, because I know here in the US,
Yeah.
when a situation like that happens, the federal regulators will take over the bank.
Exactly. Yeah.
It happens all the time. Banks do have mergers, but banks sometimes are taken over by the federal regulators.
Yeah.
But we don't have, and if you look at the actual banking laws in Liberia,
Mhm.
it's, it says so in the banking laws. Don't take my word for it.
Yeah.
Go to moci.gov.lr. If
There
you
you
go
go.
in there, you will see the banking laws where it talks about the CBL regulating the banks and being able to step in and take over a bank
Right.
when they start doing all this little, lack of a better phrase, yama yama.
Yeah.
So when I saw that, I'm saying to myself, wow, this bank is probably insolvent.
Mhm.
Because when you have this number of non-performing loans, which means people have missed payments, people not be able to pay it back,
Mhm.
if depositors were to come and demand their money, they're not going to get it back.
Yeah.
You know, so that's a major concern. In terms of the names on the list,
Yeah.
I'm not too concerned about that right now because I think those people, they do have some claim against the bank when need, you know,
Mhm.
push comes to shove. But
Yeah.
others may try to use the names on the list for political gain, you know.
Right.
But I'm not into that whole thing using the names as a political gain. It only makes sense for me in terms of the political space
Yeah.
if I see a lot of current government officials on
Mhm.
that list. You know, if people like Nathaniel McGill is
Mhm.
on that list, or the former government official, he's on that list, I'm concerned. What collateral did he put up to
Yeah.
get that loan? So I want to see, you know, like the vice president, what assets they put up to get that loan. So
Right.
yeah, that's my initial take on it, Gabe.
Nice. And I think I think yours is more in depth than what everybody was thinking. And I think you alluded to some of that where everybody was thinking. Initially, mine too, that's what I was thinking. Like, hey, this is, these people on this list, all of our attention were on the people that were on the list, right? And then, like you said, yeah, somebody from an analytical standpoint, you say, hey, forget those people on the list. There's a bigger story here than the people that are on the list. So I'm glad you're able to give the perspective in terms of, hey, there's there's a bigger problem. It could be insolvent. You should be looking at the insolvency. You should be looking at the central bank for not even taking over, at that level. Um, but before we get deep down into it, I wanted just to, and again, thanks to Anthony for giving us this level of details. Just this is how the LBDI um, was created. It was created to do an act for national legislature in
Mm-hmm.
1961. And he, we even went as further to say, since 1988, LBDI has also acted as a commercial bank.
That's important right there.
Right, right.
LBDI really opened that door in 1965, even though the legislature put the law in place in 1961. I think it was up to like 1965 they really started doing true, some real business, lending. They were a non-commercial bank at the time. But hi to my man Prince and Mr. San. Welcome, buddy.
Yeah.
That what you just put up there since 1988, that is important. But let me take it a step back. It's not just LBDI that's having this issue of non-performing loans.
Right.
I was watching this stuff over a decade ago. If you go on the Executive Mansion's website, you pull up the speeches, the annual message by President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf from 2013. Pull that up, go to page 8. I remember when Ellen made that statement. Ellen used to try to shame people from borrowing money and not pay it back. People don't follow some of these things that long in the banking sector. But Ellen had been trying to shame people. So this thing goes way back. This is not a George Weah administration situation.
Right.
It's been around for a long time. It's becoming worse under this administration. It's practically doubled under this administration than during Ellen's time.
Right.
But it's been around.
Okay.
Because when Ellen was making her annual message, she told people to stop paying back their loans. But folks, here's the thing. It's not just LBDI. There are people, you see, there are people who are owing money, or banks that are also owing money to the CBL.
Yeah.
CBL is not meant, a central bank is not meant to lend money directly to individuals. That's not what central bank meant to do, right? There are what we call the lender of last resort.
Lender of last resort, yep.
In case a bank is about to fail, here in the US, banks will borrow from each other overnight.
Yep.
Banks will call me up over at the investment bank. Listen, or I will put up something saying, hey, I'm selling $100 million.
Right.
Bank would tell me what rate they're interested in paying. We would lend them $100 million, right? I had signing authority of like around $750 million.
Yeah.
Banks will lend money to each other overnight. If they try to lend from someone overnight and the person says no because you're kind of risky, then they go to a central bank. That's what central banks are meant for. But that's not how it works in Liberia. Liberia is an interesting and strange place.
And that's
Liberia is very strange in terms of the way they operate.
And for me, and I think this is something I always push back on people. Like, this is why you always hear people say, oh, you would hear this is what things are done around the world, in other countries in the region. But the moment you mention Liberia, oh, Liberia is that we're unique. That's the kind of thing they would tell you, oh, Liberia, we are unique. And that uniqueness means that, hey, in another word, is that we're not following what we're supposed to do.
We're not following the norm. We mix stuff up in Liberia and people get away with it. Right now, if everybody who has money. So back to the whole thing about 1988 and LBDI getting into the commercial business. That, my friend, if you're going to have a situation where an investment bank is getting into commercial activity, you need to have some security in place to protect depositors. LBDI has like a little insurance thing similar to the FDIC, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corp, but they don't follow it to the letter. The reason that thing is so important is that's what got the U.S. in trouble when roughly, I think it was a little over 1,000 banks failed and it went into the Great Depression that started from 1929 up until 1933. Then the U.S. FDR came in and it put in place a law. That law led to the formation of the FDIC. It was written by what's called the Glass-Steagall Act. But when Liberia did this thing in 1988 to make LBDI start doing this commercial thing, they didn't put this kind of regulation and mechanism in place to protect depositors. Don't just look at just LBDI, because if you put your money in some other banks like GT Bank and other banks, I guarantee they're having the same issues. You can't go the next day and pull your money out because they're waiting for a new deposit to come in. It's the old-fashioned Ponzi scheme. That is not good in a country. Not good at all.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, yeah, you got it.
No, I was just wanted to, in addition to what you're saying, so also the another responsibility of the LBDIs, is to facilitate the creation or expansion of small, medium-sized, and large-scale productive businesses in various sectors such as agriculture, industrial, and service industry. This is part of the reason that bank were created. And lastly, and is to provide increased goods and services for the rapidly growing consumption requirements of the economy. So that was in addition to the many other reasons. Those are some of the reasons why this bank was created, or the banking act was created, which was to meet the servicing need of the Spanish economy in Liberia. So for me, when I look at this thing, when I first saw it, as somebody who worked in banking as well, I just thought that it gives a broader story, which as someone that you alluded to, as to why we, since 1961, we have yet to formulate or create a sustainable, well-oiled financial sector in our country that can continue to run and meet the needs and services of businesses and consumer in our country. It paints a bigger picture of why we continue to be in this place. And this is what I want to get to there before I pose my next question to you. So you work in banking for 30 years, right? The central bank. So this is, I like to call, I want to paint this picture, right? The economy, right? This whole, the central bank in our economy is like the pilot in a plane. The small businesses are the engine of that plane. The banks are like the fuel, right? So the fuel you have to put the fuel in the engine, which is a small economy, in the small and medium-sized businesses. So the banks have to be funding small and medium-sized businesses, and the pilot, which is the central bank, to continue to pilot that plane to a destination. Now there are some time where it has to be landing. The pilot have to pick it up. That means if the central bank has to be monitoring employment, they have to be monitoring inflation, and they have to be looking at other monetary policy in addition to monitoring interest rate. So again, the small businesses are like the engine. The banks in our country are like the fuel. And at the top of that, you have the central bank, which is the pilot. But if you have the engine are not getting fuel within them. I mean, they're not getting money put into them. They're not having lending ability. They're not being able to have access to credit within that economy, right? The pilot itself that's supposed to be doing their job, they're sleeping at the cockpit, right? And now we have the bigger engine, we have the bigger problem here, which is the fuel. The central banks, I mean the commercial banks that's supposed to be putting fuel in that engine are having problem as well. What do you think happened to this plane of an economy, elaborate economy that we have currently as we have it?
So the problem is the Minister of Finance in Liberia tries to act as if he's the central bank governor.
Right.
Remember when they had the mop up? Who was leading the mop up? The Minister of Finance jumped right in and decided to do the whole mop up exercise.
Mhm.
That's the problem you have right there, because the central bank doesn't behave like a central bank. Central bank has several mandates. One of them is to stabilize the economy. The
Mhm.
other one is to make sure that inflation is low in the country. The other
Yep.
one is to also ensure that you have very good employment in the country.
Yep.
The other one is to work as a lender of last resort. Those are the mandates of the central bank. In fact, it's in the act that created the central bank. Where did they get it from? They got it from the Federal Reserve System here in the US.
Yep.
Federal Reserve Bank was created back in 1913 here in the US.
Mhm.
The US struggled with the whole Federal Reserve System, but they don't have just one Federal Reserve Bank in the US. There are 12.
Yep.
In fact, something real quick off the topic. Someone sent me a photo of that check with that brother Kev Hassan thing on it.
Yep.
The reason why the check is fake is because every bank that is part of the Federal Reserve system, they all have a routing number.
Right.
You know that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
The credit unions are not part of the Federal Reserve system. So credit unions, they deal with the Credit Union National Association. But every Federal Reserve bank in this country has its own, all the checks in. So Bank of America is part of the Federal Reserve system. It has a routing number. It's 9 digits. So when someone sent me that check, I looked at it. I said, well, it doesn't have the 9 digits routing number.
Yeah.
So every check would start with a routing number. 01, for example, is the Federal Reserve Bank in Boston. 02, Federal Reserve Bank in New York. 03, Federal Reserve Bank of Philly.
Yep.
Then it goes 04 all the way down to 12, which is the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco. That covers the largest district. So you got FRB, Richmond, Mini, FRB in Dallas as well. So that the person who sent me that check, it doesn't have the 9-digit routing number, which means it's not real.
Yeah.
If it's real, the person forgot. The person probably deleted it, but that's what makes it not real. So back to the Federal Reserve System. So here's the thing. You got a finance minister that behaves as a central bank governor. And a central bank governor that has no clue that guy he worked over at JP Morgan, right? He was a compliance officer. That's why when someone said, hey, this guy's a compliance officer at JP Morgan, I never heard of him, right? And I've been in JP Morgan since I was actually in high school, and I grew up throughout the system, right? So I never heard of the guy, right? But here's the thing. Central banks are supposed to keep employment low. Yeah. In Liberia, they're not doing it. They're not doing it at all. When I mentioned one time that no country has ever developed without a strong financial system, going back to your question, you got to take money from people who are depositing it in the bank, give it to people who are interested in borrowing it to start a business. That's what banks are meant to do in a system, to grow the economy. You can have someone like LBDI taking money from depositors and giving it to their friends. It doesn't work that way. People who are interested in starting a business, they can't do the business because they don't have access to capital. So LBDI, they had a good idea. They took, again, the idea of how LBDI is supposed to invest in agriculture, invest in tourism. All of that stuff came from the U.S. The U.S. have banks like the FFCB, Federal Farm Credit Bank, to deal with agriculture. That's what LBDI was trying to do. They have the FHLB, Federal Home Loan Banks, to deal with the whole lending thing. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, they're not federal agencies. They're quasi-agencies. They're privately owned. But they're backed by the U.S. government. They're meant to deal with the housing. They're meant to recapitalize the bank, meaning if I borrow money from a bank, Fannie Mae would buy that loan from the bank and then sell it to Wall Street. That was what we did. We would take those loans, securitize them, and sell them to investors. That's what LBDI was meant to do. It had the right idea. But when you start hiring people who are faking their background on their resume, it makes you wonder. You got someone involved in the whole hiring process, and they're bringing people in who lack the requisite expertise. You're not going to get anywhere with growing your country. Liberia has huge potential, but we have this patronage system that if you pay me some money here, I will give you that job, or you can owe me a favor. That's why you don't have the place developing. When I told him, I said, look, you're not going to grow the economy in Liberia. One of my own men, Lester Tenney, he said, well, Liberia was growing without a strong financial system in the 60s. But you're missing the point. It's not sustainable. You are crawling. You had a larger GDP than Singapore. Look at Singapore today. They're past you. Why? Because you don't have sustainable growth. Your growth is not sustainable. The finance minister was criticizing me. He said, I don't know anything about finance and economics. I said, well, you're right. I want to work. I just walk off the street one day and people decided to hire me. I said, that's fine. I don't know anything. And he said, you don't need a strong financial system. It's hogwash. I said, okay, great. That's why these guys don't know what they're talking about. You need to
JP Morgan just pick you up the street and say, let's put a guy.
Let's put this guy here. He doesn't know anything. Let's put this guy. You think you can go through 20-something years of performance review because you just walked off a street? Come on, man.
So my last question to you on this before we pivot to the next discussion. I know we look at the list, the names on the list. We look at the incompetency of the former CEO of the bank. We also dove a little bit into the history of the bank, what it was created to do and what it hasn't been doing, and the failure thereof, which is reverberating within the Liberian economy ever since then. But there's another thing I also want us to look at. So if you look at, and I think you did talk about some of you alluded to that, but you didn't go too deep into that. So I want us to talk on two things, right? One is the oversight of the central bank over commercial bank, but also I think we have left the board out of this whole discussion. Who's supposed to oversee this whole LBDI? And the reason why I said it, as somebody who works at a bank as well, I've seen this
You're
firsthand.
vice president of a bank. You know the
Right,
deal.
right. I've seen this firsthand. How important boards are, how important the directors of a bank are. There is let me say this, and I will pose this question to you. So there is structure in place. So let's say, as you mentioned, you have authority for 700 million, right? Below that chain, there are other people that have authority level. So the way banks are set up, anything above that to a certain level, if it's within the bank's risk, it goes to what we call a credit committee. That one is no longer, because it's above your authority, is no longer something that you alone can make decision on. Now it sits behind the board. And when it go, I mean, in addition to the board, the credit committee, which is comprised of some people of the board. So when it goes to them, what they do is they look at it from a different standpoint. How exposed are we to this individual that we're going to lend this money to? How exposed are we in this sector to which we're lending this money to? And those things get reviewed on a quarterly basis. So that way they do that because they don't want to be exposed to one industry. So that way, if something happens in that industry, they become insolvent, it poses a credit risk. The board hasn't been doing that, right? And this is why we end up here. So tell me, I know, as I said, you have a very extensive background in banking. Tell me from your experience, what do you think should have been some of the responsibility of the board, and also what are the failure at the central bank regulation from stepping in addition to that?
Gabriel, you nailed it. I mean, the board is there as an oversight to make
Right.
sure that you don't have, because one of the biggest risks you'll find in banks is operational risk, right?
Yeah.
When you have someone like, what's the guy name that led to the collapse of the bank where the Queen of England was actually depositing her money? Can't think of the bank name. It will come back to me.
Right.
But operational risk is a major issue because you can have someone going rogue and doing something. That's why the board is there for oversight. In addition to that, the central bank is also there for oversight as well. I'm glad my man, Mr. Sant over here is mentioning meritocracy.
Right.
In fact, I'm just, because it was meritocracy that got Singapore where it is. The finance minister of Singapore was interviewed, and he said we hire people based on their skill level. It's not, based on family. That's why Botswana, that's also been around for about 55 years. That's why Botswana doesn't even have to chase MCC Compact. Botswana doesn't qualify for MCC Compact because their GDP per capita is higher than the threshold.
Right.
It's based on meritocracy, Mr. Sant. Just wanted to touch on that real quick. The board is there for oversight. They're not doing their job. They're the same board that approved to have someone, which is what Costa mentioned yesterday on the show, and what my man Martin Coley told me the other day. This guy was the least qualified guy, and the board approved him to become president of LBDI. That's why the board is there. The central bank's mandate in the central bank law is oversight and regulation.
Yeah.
When the central bank, look at how here in the U.S., the central bank runs something called a stress test, right?
Yes, we do that.
They run a stress test, giving some scenarios to see how well a bank can withstand a shock in the banking sector. Yeah. We used to go through this stress test all the time, right? I think the central bank in Liberia also, I think they do practice the stress test. And I haven't seen any results because they're not very transparent. But if you don't meet certain requirements, when the regulators come in, they will take over your bank.
Yeah.
We here in America, we don't feel it, but banks fail on average. About 400 to 500 banks fail a year. We don't feel it. We don't feel it because what happens is another bank simply comes in and take them over.
Yep.
There was Nations Bank, then it was Core States, and then eventually it became Wells Fargo. Just how when Bear Stearns, the investment bank, was failing, I got the call on a Sunday saying, listen, JP Morgan's taking over Bear Stearns. You need to be in New York in a hurry. I was up in New York on a Sunday night. These things happen in the background without the general population knowing about it.
Right.
And that's how these kind of things tend to happen. Banks are taking over. The board is there for oversight. It's dereliction of duty when you have 50-something% of your loans in a non-performing status. Madam Sirleaf called it out in 2013 in her annual message. It's on page 8. Go take a look at it. Don't take my word for it. It's on the executive manager's website. So the other banks pay close attention to them. Some of these guys are insolvent. I can't put my money in here today, then you tell me I got to wait 6 months before I take it out. That is nonsense.
Right.
That is nonsense.
No,
but that's what happens in Liberia. It seems to be the norm.
No, thank you. That's and I, sometimes this is why when we talk about these things, especially the banking sector and our financial sector, and people say, oh, we're going to grow the economy. When we take it over, we're going to grow the economy. I just look at them and laugh because you are, unless you bring Jesus Christ himself and plant him in Liberia to do miracle to grow it, you can come out there and do hula hoops and jump around, backflip. You don't grow your banking sector, your financial sector. You're not going anywhere. You're just selling pipe dreams to people. I wanted to say there's one thing before, in defense of those people on the list and the bank itself, before we jump to the next thing. Now I understand. I think you keep saying, Madam Sali keep calling out the those non-borrowing people who non-performing people, which I think is great. Every president should do that because she really cared about the bank sustaining and being sustainable to lead, right? But I think that was the board's, that should have been the board's responsibility. And I think maybe it went beyond her. She saw it was a problem. She should have done that, right? I think you mentioned that too. Every bank has a set percentage of loans that they deem risky, that they know some won't get paid back. That's risk. This is why banks take risks. And in their balance sheet, on their income statement, they put certain amount of money aside to cover those losses. However, it should have been reviewed every year, right? It should be reviewed every year. The board should review it every year. They put that money aside. They should be reviewing it every year. I don't know why we allow it to amount to that level, that it is becoming a bigger problem, that the board has not overseen this. But I think this should have been their responsibility. So in as much that go ahead.
Real quick. Yes, this is why I tell you, sometimes when I tell people, say, you people who are the technocrats or you people who love Liberia, you got to either stand up and do something about it. Otherwise, this country, with all of its resources, is going nowhere. Here's the craziness. In 2008, the World Bank put up money to develop a risk management system for LBDI. I know.
Wow.
So, and the World Bank did a study and found out that this issue existed in terms of the non-performing loans. So the World Bank had a list of things that should have been corrected. And it said, look, one thing we need in our bank is a risk management system to reduce the number of non-performing. The World Bank put up $100,000. Again, go to the World Bank's website. It's there. The contractors that brought in to work with LBDI is from a company called DAI, right? Big time contractor. So this was done to put in place the risk management system to make sure that you don't have banks going above the 10% threshold for non-performing loans. What happened to that risk management system?
It just to the wayside.
It just threw it to the trash. So the things exist. But then you have, so I would not focus so much on, I would kind of look at John Davis, because he was there for a very long time. And this is a guy who was teaching finance or economics, or he got a background in there. So what was he doing with all of these non-performing loans while he was there managing the bank as the bank's president? That's the person I would bring into the Senate to answer some questions right off the top. Yeah. What's going on in here?
Yeah.
And that statement that LBDI put on saying, oh, this list is fraudulent, we didn't do this. Pay close attention to how they actually constructed the notice, how they constructed it. They neither admitted nor denied in terms of the
Right.
names on the list. They're just saying
Right.
that they didn't put the list out. And then they threatened to sue people if people started. But,
What does that tell you?
but Gabriel, if you sue somebody on a list,
That means you're admitting.
when a person file for discovery, or the person will put you on the stand and make you admit
Exactly.
whether the names are correct or not. Come
Right.
on, you can lie under oath. So it's nonsense when they're saying, when they're making those kind of nonsense threats. You got to sue somebody. The person will just file for discovery. They will ask you, is the list correct or not? If you say no, okay, they file for discovery. They want to look at your books and records. So that whole statement, I just kind of look at it and say, oh, this is stupidity at its best. So,
Perfect. All right. So let's dive into the next topic here. Man, thank you. I enjoyed having this conversation with you. Let's jump into the next topic here, and I think you're gonna like this one. So the MCC Compact. So we know that since this administration took over, I think it was the last one that passed. They passed that one, but barely. But 5 years without an agreement, right? And the president is currently in, what is it, the US with the Africa. We will get into that, the US Africa summit. Everybody else, I think there was 4 countries that were giving um, you know money to leave, to as part of that agreement, but we were never one of them, even though we passed this, apparently did pass the scorecards. um, what are your thoughts on that?
and that would have been a huge opportunity for Liberia.
Mhm.
But there are reasons why Liberia didn't pass the MCC Compact. One of the key reasons why they're not passing is lack of capacity.
Mhm.
The people they have working in the government, they just don't have the right capacity. But the most important reason why they're not passing is because the level of corruption
Mhm.
within the administration. You cannot have an administration where your top 3 guys, 3 of the top people in your administration have been sanctioned.
Yeah.
And then you expect to win a compact. President Weah, George Weah came into place, became president in 2018. He started his tenure.
Mhm.
Matabia from Sierra Leone, he came in around April of 2018 as well.
Mhm.
I think he's on his second compact.
Yep.
The thing that was kind of interesting, it was kind of funny, is when you pass the threshold, the initial threshold, you don't necessarily get the compact your first year. They want to see a track record of you meeting the threshold year over year, the 10 out of 20 and passing the corruption. So when I saw the celebration saying we passed the threshold, I'm like, normally people don't just get the money immediately, because Matabio, when he passed it in 2019, he didn't get money until he passed it again in 2020. So it's usually your second time around that you pass it. So in order for them to pass, in order to get some money, they actually have to hang around until 2024.
Mhm.
They have to hang around until 2024 in order to actually get some money. But the requirements for the compact is going to change next year and become a little bit harder.
Mhm.
Not only are you have to meet some of these thresholds, but you also have to show that the unemployment in your country is going down.
Mhm.
Do you guys know the unemployment rate in Liberia?
Mhm.
They don't know the unemployment rate. Why? They don't collect any data on that stuff.
Yeah.
So, but to go this long without getting the compact, which is essentially a huge boost. It's a huge boost for a country that has no credit rating. You know that.
Yeah.
They don't have any credit rating.
Yeah.
So the only other way, they cannot float a euro bond. They cannot float a dollar denominated bond. So the only way they can get money, this compact was going to be a huge thing. So you look at Dun & Bradstreet, Fitch Investor Services, Moody's. They don't have any credit rating.
Yeah.
But they have failed consistently, and they're never going to get it.
Yeah. And it's to add to that, it's so I work in a position where I have access to Moody's. Sometimes I can just poke around there and look at other countries' credit rating, or even look at companies' credit rating or regional credit rating, right? So something one day I always do that. One day I was poking around, say, you know what, let me go check Liberia to see if this thing is really true. We don't have the only thing you can see that is close to a credit rating. Some of those tankers that bring uh
Mhm.
gas to the country, right? Those are some of the companies that own them. Those are the only thing you can see that have some credit rating, because they do borrow a lot of money. So that's the closest thing you could have to, in terms of to see anything as a credit rating on the
Yeah.
country, which is those tankers that bring gas to the country. But in terms of to say, hey, this is the country credit rating, we play around. We look at different companies, sometimes even hospital networks in like the New York, this place. You look at that, sometimes you see that it'll upgrade that credit or bring it down for such and such reason. The closest thing we have were just the tankers that bring gas in our country, the companies that own them. That's a credit rating, the only credit rating you will see on there. And for me, I think everything I wanted to talk about, I think you talked about it already, which is we don't have credit rating.
Mhm.
If you can't float a euro bond, you can't raise any debt on the capital market, not only on the capital market in your country itself. This is like your only like chance you have. Like this is like end all be all. In addition to whatever assistance you get to meet your budget every year from the government. This is like, this is supposed to be an extra boost that I can't get any money. This is 250 million every time you pass it, if you're able to pass it, right? So we're supposed to put, and sometimes the kind of question that I ask myself, over 64,000 people in working in our government, maybe it's lower than that now. You're trying to tell me there's nobody that can talk some sense in this president's head to say, or to be able to see this thing from a tunnel vision, that this is the only thing we have to pass. This is the only source of money we can guarantee, the low hanging fruit that we can get in order to be able to get some extra money to take on other projects, to be able to tell this guy to do that. And we continue to fail it year over year, year over year. But yet still we continue to have a finance minister who will come out and run laps around people on these other shows because they don't understand what they're talking about, and we continue to celebrate it. You know, so for me, I don't like when people talk about these things, especially from my economic standpoint. I say your problem is right in front of you. Whether you choose to acknowledge them and address them, or you feel to talk politics and sing muya muya and continue in this pipe dream, that is your problem. But we have a solution. We have an opportunity through the MCC scorecard to really be able to get some extra money here, because we can't get it anywhere else. But year over year we continue to fail. So for me, I think that's all I wanted to say to that, because I think you've covered everything that we needed to say on this. Yeah.
The finance minister has been saying for years that this government has been receiving little aid compared to Madam Sirleaf. And you saw the post, and I've been saying this for years. I mean, I haven't really posted anything on it because I knew it was a lie, and people kept believing it.
Right.
But then I said, okay, let me just post the truth, the facts out there.
All right. You want to dig in?
But we know now, because people have been reading my posts,
Mhm.
that during the first 3 years of Ellen's administration, she received less money than the first 3 years of George Weah's administration. In fact, George Weah received over $250,000 more, over $243 million more than Ellen in her first 3 years. The second year of Weah's administration, he received around $290 something million.
Mhm.
Around that time, Ellen was receiving maybe around 100 and something million.
Mhm.
This government received a ton more money than Ellen, but Ellen managed to grow the economy when she came in year over year.
Yeah.
In 2017, when Liberia came out of the Ebola crisis,
Yeah.
the economy started to grow. Immediately in 2018, when this government came in, the economy tanked,
Yeah.
and it never recovered from that. The MCC that we were just talking, Gabriel, would have been a huge bump because we cannot raise money in the capital market
Mhm.
because we don't have the credit rating. Liberia is getting aid from the US government, so we could have leveraged that aid. The government also tries to borrow money because the CBL issued its bills, but they don't have a large pool of subscribers. So when they try to, over here in the U.S., the Federal Reserve Bank raised a ton of money because they sell U.S. Treasuries.
Yeah.
They sell U.S. Treasuries. The CBL tries to do something similar, but they don't have a large base of people who are interested in buying those things. Because when you buy the CBL bills and bonds, you're essentially lending money to the government.
Mhm.
But you don't have that base. So that's
No.
the government cannot raise money that way. So the only other thing would have been this compact.
Yeah.
But the government is not very strategic. When Matabio came in, if you go and you read what Matabio did, you can say, damn, if we had been doing the same thing by 2019, 2020, similar to
I would have gotten
Matabio,
$1 billion already.
you would have gotten over $1 billion.
Yep. $1 billion.
But they were putting the partisan in positions where these people did not qualify to be in. Matabio came in, started putting some technocrats in there. You could go onto a website in Sierra Leone, you click on a state, or you click on a village or something, and you can see the population. You can drill down into the data if you go on Sierra Leone.
Wow.
It's not difficult to do. This is something that I'm not going to get into the work that I do right now, but it's something similar to what I'm training people to do as well.
Yeah.
But the potential is there. The potential is there. MCC has come and gone.
Mhm.
MCC has come and gone. It was huge opportunity. We lost that opportunity. So now they're trying to put a new spin on it, right? So what is the big spin they're putting on it? America promised to help African countries with election.
Right.
We know America was going to help anyways, but it's not just for Liberia. It's for several African countries out there. Why? Because they don't want you coming in and cheating in the elections.
Mhm.
Election has consequences, and it creates a lot of conflict in Africa. Take a look around Africa. You saw what happened with what's his name in Uganda. You see what happened in Africa. Elections always lead to conflict. It was because of the election in Ivory Coast that people running for presidency in Ivory Coast ended up at the World Crimes Court, because there were riots and stuff, and people ended up getting hurt and killed.
Mhm.
So elections are pretty significant events in Africa. That's why the U.S. government has put this warning out. Don't mess with elections, or you're going to get sanctioned. Plain and simple.
Yeah.
So-
And it's I sometimes I hope these guys will, for those of you that interact with them, I don't know if you interact with them. I hope sometimes somebody could talk some sense into their head and strip that partisan politics away from them, to say, listen, regardless of your political leaning or whatever it is, this is bigger than you. This is the something that's supposed to benefit the country. So take away your partisan hat and whatever political leaning you are, and look at this thing from an economic standpoint. That if you win, that means the Liberian people win. So, and really be able to drill some sense into the head that they will grab this bull by the horn and do something tangible, and that will impact lives. But as we continue to be on
We
this
don't do
whole,
that.
right.
We start putting our partisans in. We start giving our partisans jobs.
Yeah.
But take a look at what Mozambique did. Not Mozambique. Botswana did.
Botswana, right.
They bump up the amount of money that went to the education system.
Mhm.
Start investing in education. Start investing in technology. Right now, you can but you also have to put money into the internet, which is part of what the African Summit, I think part of the outcome from the African Summit was the U.S. is willing to put more money into technology.
Yeah.
Damn, but Gabriel, the fiber optics hit Liberia back in what, 2011?
2011. It's been
From
laying
Gabon.
in the water there. Yeah.
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 Since 2011. Why we don't have widespread internet in Monrovia and going out to some of the counties? We don't have widespread internet.
A good public partnership would have been able to do that. The government put up half of the money. You put a private entity put up half of the money, and allow that private company to be able to take that fiber optics and bring fast speed internet to every part of the country in that. But I think sometimes it's
They're
just
trying
like
to
we
do it
have
now.
so many opportunities.
It's
So much
there, man.
opportunity. Yeah, but
Look, you let the young people right now put your money into technology, especially the internet. Put your money in there. I'm telling you, it's going to boost GDP by at least 2 to 3% if you put money into the internet right now. So young people can be able to get into the internet and take classes overseas. Doctors can be able to go on the internet and look up information for certain type of diseases or connect to other doctors here in the US. People can go on the internet and it can be some telehealth, telemedicine. You can do that. Right now, Alphabet, the parent company of Google, we know they're in there doing something similar to what has taken place in Ghana, right? They're trying to boost access to internet across all of Monrovia. It's a partnership with UCID and Google as well. It's a partnership right now. So they're trying to lay down this fiber optics across Monrovia, but it's kind of slow because, again, it's Liberia. Rather than bringing the big machines to do it, they got people there with shovel digging holes. You can't make this stuff up.
Yeah.
You can't make this stuff up.
Wallahi. Oh, wow.
So there's a company actually involved in that. They've done it in other African countries. They did it in Ghana. I can't think of the name. I've mentioned the name before, but they're actually working with the parent company of Google and UCID, funded by UCID, to spread internet. Put the money in education for the young people.
But let's take some comments, and then after that, maybe we can take 15 or 20 minutes to take comments, and then we dive. We have two more things on our agenda. Then we dive into part 3 and part 4.
That sounds like a plan.
Okay. All right. So I'm just starting back here from the top when we were discussing the LBDI insolvency. So this is Yini Guva. He said, we do have an agency like the FDI in I said, do we have an agency like the FDIC in Liberia? I think that was a question. Do we have something like that, like an insurance protection for deposits?
The central bank does have, it's written in the Central Bank Act, but I don't know if they're really enforcing it. But it's actually written in there that banks, because the FDIC over here, who pays the insurance is the banks that pays the insurance for the FDIC, even though the banks have been complaining that the insurance rate is too high. But it's important because the purpose of that is to put confidence back in the system, right? So the FDIC insures people individually up to 250,000, and that was because during the Great Depression, over 1,000 banks or so went into default. So something like that does exist in Liberia, but I don't know if they're actually enforcing it.
Okay. Well, Yoni, I think you have your answer. I think this one was to you. This one was for you. This is Camel. She said she loved you.
Nah, that's for you, bro.
Camel. How do you say your name, sir? Camel. Miss Watson, thank you for following us. And this is Emmanuel. He said, major reason banks in Liberia accumulate non-performing loan is lack of the modern electronic banking processing system. There's no alert system, no shareholders and depositor in Liberia that banks are underwriting loans. Example, the Kilandu's case. Kilandu's case. You want to respond to that or no?
Nah, I touched on that on Costa's show yesterday. We don't want to go through that isolated case. But Emmanuel is right. The banks are not kind of transparent in terms of their lending practices. So, the company that's actually working with UCID is called C Squared. C Squared is partnering with UCID and Google to put internet in Monrovia. And the American ambassador said at one time, he said, you guys do this, it would have a tremendous impact on the healthcare system. Doctors are actually using their own minutes to look up information on certain type of diseases in Liberia. And the minutes don't even last the entire month. It just lasts about a week. Then they're all out of data, which is kind of scary. I mean, for a country been around for about 170 something years.
Wow. Yeah, I think the way you just spoke about somebody didn't mention that here. This is the same guy. I don't know if it's a guy or he said this should be on ELBC so Liberians will learn. education pays when a country utilizes the expertise of its citizens. I agree with you. And then Emmanuel again said Liberia need to develop the security portfolio for its labor market. CBL can sell T-bill in a commercial market, largely encouraged in retail marketing. Um, ERA supermarket in Moravia pay its employee in cash. No 401k plan for employees. Uh, all right. So I think that's all we have for comment. The rest of them were, I don't think you want to look at them.
Yeah, if you look at some of the countries that are doing well, Emmanuel Jackson, those countries that have very high savings rates.
Mhm.
But the percentage of people in Liberia that's what we call unbanked, meaning they're not using banks, that number is very high. And the reason being, people lack confidence in the banking system. You
Yeah.
put your money in the bank today, you come back tomorrow, you may not even gain access to it. It's
Right.
that trust in the banking system that needs to be put back
Mhm.
in order for people to say, okay, I will put my money in the bank. And when you put your money in the bank, you can come back and tap that money. But then also, people, entrepreneurs can be able now to come and borrow that money and go ahead and start businesses. Because when they start business,
Mhm.
they create jobs.
Yeah.
That's what my man Gabriel said early on.
Yeah.
Small businesses are the engine of an economy.
Yeah.
That's what helps the U.S. economy is the small businesses.
Right.
So we got to put confidence back in the banking system. Let's not all just focus on LBDI. Let's look
Yeah.
at some of the other banks because, like,
Yeah.
what's that? Ecobank, Ecobank, is that
Bank,
right?
UBA, IB Bank.
Mhm.
IB is another Liberian bank. Yeah.
They're in the same boat.
Yeah.
The crazy thing about it is, Ecobank is one of the largest banks in the country.
Mhm.
But people have the same situation when they go to the bank, they can't get their money. But
Mhm.
when you read those guys' financial statement, they are bragging about how much money they are making in other countries. But if I put my money in that bank, why can I get it
Especially
back?
EcoBank. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, you're bragging in your financials how well you're doing, but why can't you pay me my little deposit when I put it in there?
Mhm.
Because they have poor lending practices in Liberia.
Mhm.
And because they know the banking rules in Liberia are not being enforced by the central bank regulators.
Yeah.
That's why the nonsense they can do in Liberia, they cannot do in other African
In other
countries.
African country. Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolute nonsense.
You're right. EcoBank is one of the most profitable bank in the region, in Africa as a whole, including UBA. But again, as you said, is we have to have a central bank that is very intentional about what it is actually doing, and that is very intentional about carrying out its policy in terms of, hey, we are piloting the economy here in Liberia, and whatever we do in this cockpit of taking this plane to where we needed to go, it matters. It matters not just to the people in Liberia, it matters to every Liberian. But I don't think, like you said, the current governor is a former compliance from. I don't even know if he was even at JP Morgan because he said
That man,
nobody ever heard of the guy. Maybe,
that man having lived the life of a true banker, and the
yeah.
man is the head of the
Um.
central bank of a country. It is
Yeah.
amazing. How
And
did he get that job? I have no idea.
right.
Absolutely amazing.
Right. And that was those are the problem we're facing, and like you said, just how the CEO of the LBDI was put in. I think that's how he was put in as well. As I said, I met the guy at the airport on my way back from Liberia one time, and we're trying to chop it up. You know, he just had to jump on a plane, so we had to. But from the initial discussion we had, he just like the conversation was going over his head, for lack of better conversation. Um, but let's dive into the third items on our list here.
Yes.
So I think we kept alluding to this. I'll keep talking about this. Um, there's a current U.S. Africa's Leaders Summit that is happening now. I think it's still ongoing. Um, what we want to look at is, you know, what we've seen so far is that some countries, I think it was Kenya, two other, three other countries, were able to secure some type of monetary support from the U.S. government. But Liberia, we like to call ourselves the small brother of the USA or whatever it is. We came into the room, our small brother, our big brother just walk out of there without even giving us even cola to eat, cola. So he just walk out of there. Um, so we didn't get anything from that. People are walking away with commitment and monetary support. But somebody who we claim we have this kind of bona fide relationship with that date back, centuries, right? Say decades. We walk out of there without anything. That, as you said, there was also Google Africa just, I think, they're committing $1 billion to the continent to expand internet, which I think you talked about earlier. So there is this level of commitment that this summit is actually generating. But in our case, I want us to look at it from our perspective as Liberia as a whole, from a political, whether you want to look at it from a political or economic standpoint. What do you think uh, we should have done, or if you were at that summit or advising the president, what do you think your side chat with him should have been as he went into uh, that meeting with President Biden?
Man, if you have the ear of the most powerful leader in the free world, you got to take every advantage of that, right? You got to take advantage of that. I mean, the U.S. had this policy where when it comes to foreign aid, you have your pledges, you have your commitments, and then you have your disbursements. So we know pledging is, hey, I'm going to send you like $1 billion or so.
Yeah.
There's nothing to back it up.
Yeah.
But we hear that the U.S. is making commitments. So commitment is something now they're saying we're going to do to help Africa. And then disbursement is when the money is actually released to you. So don't start celebrating until the check is in the bank, right? Until the check, not just in the bank, until the check actually clears the bank.
Yeah.
Right? So you don't celebrate until it clears. So the U.S. made a lot of commitments for Africa. If I'm there talking to Joe Biden, especially a country like Liberia with its close relationship with the United States, I'm looking for Joe Biden. I know I'm not going to get the commitment. I'm not the MCC Compact, but I'm pushing. I don't want to. All right, so let me. For me, this is what I would tell Joe Biden.
Yeah,
I want them to do. I want to create a cross-border mortgage program, and I need the U.S. government to underwrite that program. Bear in mind, it was the creation of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and the ability for people to leverage the equity in their home, and also the ability for people to put down a small down payment using leverage to buy a bigger property, because no one's actually buying property for cash.
Yeah.
So I am telling Joe Biden, President Joe Biden, that I want to work with it used to be called the Overseas Partners Investment Corporation, OPIC. I want to work with, it's now called the Development Finance Corp, right? I want to work with the Development Finance Corp to create something called a cross-border mortgage program.
Yeah.
The reason being, I want this agency to be similar to Fannie and Freddie, where they will buy these mortgages, because I'm probably getting too technical.
No, go ahead. That's what we need.
What it does is, so say for example, we have a bank, LBDI, which I wouldn't put my money in, but let's say LBDI to keep the conversation easy. Let's say LBDI has about $10 million. If LBDI is lending money for people to build their houses, keep the numbers easy. Let's say $1 million a pop to keep the numbers easy. They can only lend up to 10 people, and then they're depleted. The reason Fannie and Freddie works is they come back, they buy the loans from the bank. By buying the loan from the bank, they put the money back in the bank so the bank can start lending again.
Yep.
So with the cross-border program, you're asking Joe Biden and his people now, we need your help, because Wall Street is not going to do it.
Right.
We need your help in getting the Development Finance Corporation to buy back the loans that we're issuing in Liberia. They will underwrite it. They'll put insurance on it. They'll underwrite it.
Yeah.
So if Joe Biden were to set aside, let's say about $500 million, that, my friend, using John Maynard Keynes' formula, the Keynesian methodology,
Yeah.
it's going to create thousands of jobs in Liberia.
Yeah.
Thousands of jobs. I just put it out there. Pick it up. Let somebody pick it up. Run with it.
Right.
Their problem is when
Right.
they decide to run with it, they're going to use people who have zero banking background. We're going to be back in the same place again, who do not understand what I just said, to try to do it. So I would sell, and the only reason why I'm saying that is because I've actually written that. I've actually sent it to the Development Finance Corporation. I've sent it to USAID. They all read it. They all loved it. And that's a plan that's being tested. All the numbers have been crunched. So that's what, if I'm in We As Government, I'm selling to Joe Biden.
That will be the first
It's
on
going
your
to
list.
create over 100,000 jobs. If you look at the feasibility study that I wrote, that's what I would sell to Joe Biden. And you have that stuff in hand. You know what you're talking about before you open your mouth.
All right. You know, as I said, I love having this conversation.
Bill Carson's laughing at me. He said, I got $10 million. I'll put in LBDI. No, Bill.
you know the reason why I love having this conversation with you, and I will say this, that's because you look at things from a different perspective, right? As opposed to, like, you don't have this kind of hurt that everybody's talking about this. So let me look at this from that. When everybody saw this summit, where everybody was saying is that, oh, and you go in any chat room, and that was one of the things that kept going through my head as well. But I think what you just said, mentioned, it just confirmed that, right? Not confirm what they're saying, but confirm that how your thought processes work, right? When everybody saw this summit and they said that is coming out of there without anything, you know. Now I'm not trying to play devil's advocate here, right? Is that, oh, the guy went to the summit, he didn't get anything from that, which is true. He didn't get anything from there, right? But this whole notion that we should just go you know bag, and let's say the president could have committed, let's say, because you didn't win the MCC Coca, you can say, you know what, I'll give you guys 250 million for infrastructure project. They give you that money, you do something with it. But the reason why I said is that you kind of think differently, is that what you said you wanted to do is to create something that will create an industry, as opposed to just going to beg for money that it will give to you for you to invest in you see, that's the kind of logical perspective I like to look, the way I like to look at things. Don't just go beg for money. They give you, like, go beg for a loaf of bread and give it to you. You come out of there, oh, everybody getting a loaf of bread, I got a loaf of bread, you come out of there. But pitch something that they will invest in, and they will say, hey, this person he's looking to create something that will create an industry that will, even after that money is long gone, that industry will exist, and it will help them, will continue to, in perpetuity, continue to create jobs within our country, right?
Exactly.
And that's the kind of way I want us to look at things, that we shouldn't just go beg for aid. Right? We shouldn't just go begging for aid, but we should look at, say, hey, I've started this somebody, I'll put it this way, and I'll turn this back over to you. A mentor of mine told me, right, one of the senior vice presidents at the bank, because I said, I kept saying, I'm trying to find somebody who will mentor me as well. He said, don't just go look for a mentor. Don't just go ask for somebody to mentor you. You need to say, this is where I need to be in the next 5 or 10 years, and then find somebody to say, this is where I want to be, and then the person will help you get there. But you can't just come to the person and say, hey, I want you to be my mentor, without identifying what you want to go. So this is what you're speaking to. You don't just want to say, I want I want you commit some money to us because we're doing this. I want you underfund our budget because we're having a budget shuffle. But you're saying, hey, this is what we're working on from a mortgage standpoint, because we don't have a mortgage financing to create capitalization within our banking system. So I want to put through this project forward, and I want the DFC to underwrite it. And that way, even after that money runs out, we will have a mortgage financing system that will continue to capitalize on bank, because every time we do mortgages, the banks will sell it to the DFC and will put that money back in the bank, and we'll be able to do more within the bank. that's the kind of, this, and when I say I love talking to you, this is the kind of way, I think everybody should be thinking in terms of how we should be looking at transforming our country from an economic standpoint. Yeah.
Because you're growing the construction sector.
Right.
You're growing the agriculture sector because construction workers got to eat.
Right.
But the key thing is you don't have the technical skills to bring the technology job right away.
Right.
But you have the young population. The population is growing at a rate of around 2.7% a year, which is crazy, right? Because it's one of the fastest growing population in sub-Saharan Africa at 2.7% per year. Imagine population growing at 2.7% per year, but the poverty rate is only dropping 0.9%.
Right.
So your population is growing faster than you're actually taking people out of poverty. So at that rate, you would never keep up.
Right.
So you need something to accelerate the job creation to keep up with the population growth. So if I'm coming to the summit, I want to have a game plan in place because bear in mind, back in 2014 or so, USAID funded a project where they sent in, please, folks, go onto Google. Reading is fundamental. Go onto Google and you can do the search for it, right? They brought 2 researchers in from William and Mary. These guys were trying to understand what China, the impact of China in sub-Saharan Africa. America wanted to know the kind of impact China was having in sub-Saharan Africa. So USAID funded this project. They gave money to a couple of researchers from William and Mary. Those boys went in there. They wrote about what China was doing. The U.S. was concerned because China was making a lot of headway in Africa. And the U.S. was concerned because U.S. top competitor, number 2 in terms of GDP is China, right?
Yeah.
So U.S. is concerned. So this summit was actually meant for U.S. to start re-engaging in Africa because they were losing ground to China.
Right.
So when I'm coming in place, I know that U.S. is eager to build some relationship, especially with Liberia. I'm coming with a game plan on how to get the young people, how to get people out of poverty by using this one program. Tourism is great, but it wouldn't create the kind of transformation right away.
Yes.
The downstream impact right away, similar to the kind of money that you would have Liberians in the diaspora pumping into
mortgages in Liberia.
In that sector.
Right.
Is huge. Liberians would love to go and put up a house on the beach somewhere in Liberia, somewhere on one of those lakes. Right. We have very beautiful places down there to build houses. Liberians wants to do it.
Right.
But they can't do that stuff 100% cash. That's how the U.S. was before, they decided to form Fannie and Freddie. Same thing. Agriculture, they formed the FFCB, Federal Farm Credit Bank, to help farmers. They started building farm to market roads. The only place you can see FM roads right now is in Texas. All these farm and market roads. But that was what brought agriculture from the market to the farm, and to finance those roads, it was some of the federal programs that the U.S. put in place.
Right.
We don't have those things in Liberia, but it doesn't mean we can't do it. Why? Botswana did it. Singapore did it. Taiwan did it. Taiwan was corrupt. The 3 tigers, Taiwan, Hong Kong, Singapore, corrupt as they come. Look at those countries today. Look at the Changi Airport in Singapore. You ever seen that airport?
Yeah. I mean, from a picture, not
the airport has movie theaters. It has a tropical rainforest in the airport. This was a country that Liberia was doing so much better than. Look at that country today. Yeah. Goes back to what my man, Brother Hassan said early on, meritocracy. Got to bring people in who know what the hell they're talking about. So, if I had Joe Biden's here, that's what I would pitch to him. Hey, John Maynard Keynes, he wrote about this thing years ago. Here's the strategy. I want to get a lot of young people out of poverty, but I also want to use some of this money to rehabilitate a lot of the former fighters. There are so many people in there who haven't been rehabilitated. They need to be rehabilitated.
Yeah.
Demobilization money was stolen.
Yeah. I agree with you. And I think I don't think you were on this show last week when we had George Fumble there. I think he alluded to some of that, but I think you just expanded it as to, like, I think the problem you're trying to solve is the capitalization problems within our financial sector. Like, if we can get, let's say if you were to go to this summit and we spoke to the the Biden administration that is eager to establish relationship in the U.S., to compete with China on there, and if we were able to convince them to say this is what we want to do. It's not just like, hey, you and I here in the diaspora building houses there, but like you said, what you kept saying is that it will allow us to be able to buy those houses without having to put up, like cash out of pocket right
Cash.
away,
Who
but
walks around with
also
100,000 cash to go buy a house? The average person cannot do that.
right? But also, what it will able to, that will be able to do, it will be, hey, if we sign that note agreement, the DFC buys it. That means that 100,000 goes directly to the bank or whatever financial institution. That is another 100,000 or 200,000, 300,000, whatever amount mortgage you take out. That is now in the bank deposit that they can lend to agriculture sector. Like you said, the tourism people want to start tourism businesses, different kind of industry and sector. It becomes like this spark that we keep looking for since the 1960 within our financial sector that will now create to now start this spark in this engine financial economy that would create this well oil spinning thing that we
Exactly,
continue
the
to
engine. Yep.
right and for sometimes I know I keep questioning. I keep every time we talk about these things, I question. I say, well, how come you're not, what are pitching these things to some of these people that are within the government to say, hey, I have this thing. Would you guys want to take a look at it? But sometimes it befalls me whether somebody's really looking at these kind of
Make a
ideas.
confession.
Right.
I pitched this to John Davis. I'll put his name out there. I
The
pitched it to
former
him,
uh,
LBDI
CEO
guy.
of LBDI.
After I had this thing vetted by the U.S. government, I pitched it to him.
Mhm.
In fact, he had me meet a couple of people over at the Liberian embassy in D.C.
Mhm.
because I work right there in D.C.
Mhm.
And I pitched it to them.
Mm.
But I'm not going to get into why it didn't work.
Why I didn't
But
work.
it didn't work because they weren't thinking to help the people.
Yeah.
They were thinking on self-interest first,
Right.
rather than holistically.
Right.
But let me touch on something real quick before I pass it back to you.
Right.
This is why I love George Fumblet, because he knows what he's talking about,
Right.
and he knows his area extremely well.
Mhm.
The reason why some of these things becomes a challenge in Liberia because we don't have the thing in place to identify individual properties.
Mhm.
We need a mechanism in place to identify individual properties. There's an article written in the New York Times a few years ago, and you can Google it. Someone wrote an article saying that the next crisis in Liberia would be a result of conflict related to land and property rights.
Mhm.
So that, and you've seen a little bit of, fighting going on in that area. But when George Fumbler also referred to this book by De Soto,
Mhm.
Why capitalism tends to work everywhere over in the U.S., but it doesn't seem to work anywhere else, is because within the capitalism system, we have ways to identify properties.
Mhm.
We can identify properties because by identifying that property, that parcel, I can put a lien on that parcel, and I know that
Mhm.
parcel belongs to so and so individual, and then we need a type of identification number, social security
Mhm.
number, or parcel identification number built into the system.
Right.
So we need that mechanism in place. So that's what George Fumbler was touching on. And then I
Yeah.
heard some people commenting and saying, oh, but Liberia had managed to survive for so long without that mechanism in place. But they don't get it. You are surviving. You're not
Surviving.
thriving.
You're not.
You're not thriving. You're only surviving. Put
Yeah.
this thing in place and you accelerate development.
Right.
But you have people who just come out just because they're bootlickers. They just want to appease certain people. They just say nonsense.
Yeah.
They just say nonsense. But George Fumbler, he was on with my man Ivan Tokpan. They
Mm.
spoke well about it. And that's
Yeah.
why I love George Fumbler. He knows his era extremely well. He talk about it, but they don't listen to George Fumbler. They don't listen to him. He's been talking
Yeah.
about this thing for years. At least I know Fumbler has been talking about this thing since 2011.
Yeah.
At least I know that. And
I
he's
think
right.
he said up to, I think, about 15 years that he been trying to push his idea. And I mean, for you and I that work in banking, I think that's something we know. Like the moment he said it, we said, voila, that could be, in terms of if you want to expedite growth, you want to expedite property rights, that is something you put in place. It will help solve some of the problems. Let me share with you a personal story that is ongoing right now, and I want to, case in point, as you were mentioning that there is property rights going on. So I bought this 3 acres in. Quickly, I will share. I bought this 3 acre in Kawa where my father lives. Right, 3 acre survey. So what I did, my papa, we plant cassava on this. Every time I go there, that's what I spend most of my time cleaning. Long story short, some guys went behind me. They sold 2 lots from my 3 acres. Right. So I kept going this run around trying to find the person who sold it. These are people that just came from nowhere. They just go there when, the person that watching over the land is not there to do those kind of things. So what I've been doing, instead of me trying to go to, if we had a legal system in place where there's these properties are identified by, codes and, collateral system where you can go to the registry and I will be able to find them that way. But now what I have to do, I have to go find a guy I sold the land from, the town chiefs that were there, everybody that were there to be able to come and boot these guys out of the land. That is the level of conflict that is in there, right? That is, some people may not be able to have that patience to say, I want to go there and resolve it that way. Some people will just say, you know what, if I see anybody on my land, coming on my land again, I will take whatever force I need to take. But problem like that could be resolved if we had, like the system type of system that you, George, and everybody else been talking about. But that is the level. So that article that person wrote that the next conflict in Liberia will be about land rights, I can attest to it. That is exactly what it will be about. Because
And it
as
was
people
written
continue
years
to,
ago when Madam
right,
Sirleaf was in office.
right,
And it's not being addressed. I mean, they're working on it, they're trying to address it, but
right,
you got to solve that issue right away. You got to
right.
put a lot of money and effort into solving that issue. But I love my brother Jimmy Eastman. What he's saying and what Jimmy Eastman is saying on the chat is it's true. This is what I was trying to define the difference between
Right.
commitment, and disbursement.
Right.
So he says the U.S. demonstrates its commitment to African continent with 55 billion in pledges. Those are pledges. In fact, right now, before the show started, I pledged I was going to send $1 million to Gabriel.
Mm.
He's going to be waiting for that to happen for a
Right.
long time.
A long time.
They make these pledges at some of these events just to kind of appease, to make happy the people there who are sitting there, the U.S.
Right.
But on a per capita basis, based on the number of people in a country, Liberia gets more money than the money that is sent, than more money from the U.S. than money that is sent to other African countries. The only other place that was getting more money than, well, let me kind of correct it in a second. The U.S. sends a ton of money to Afghanistan, and we know for good reason, for security reason, right? I think Liberia was ranked maybe about 12th or 13th on that list, but you have to look at the size of Liberia compared to Afghanistan and some other African countries. So on a per capita basis, if you look in monetary basis, Liberia is ranked like 13th in terms of money from the U.S. But on a per capita basis, Liberia is ranked, I think, in the top 3 because Liberia gets a lot of money from the U.S. Right. At a minimum, this is what Ambassador McCarthy said, at a minimum, Liberia gets around at least $110 million a year. And it goes in different sectors, right? It goes in different sectors. But these summits, Jimmy, people go out to these summits. These countries make pledges. But I bet you if China start making bigger moves in Africa, the U.S. will pump more money into Africa right away. They will start pumping more money into Africa right away. And China has been making some moves in Africa, even though China ignores human rights violations and all that stuff, which they shouldn't be doing. But the U.S. will try to compete with China and it will start pumping more money in Africa, which is why they did that research with the boys from William and Mary. So yeah, I love that thing you posted there, Jimmy. Jimmy Eastman, my man, I love that guy.
All right, so let's take a few more comments here and then we jump into the last one. Boy. Okay, so revenue development, security. Okay.
Oh, and the other thing too that was
Right.
being circulating recently, the video from what's his name, Eugene Nangbe, who seems to be working now as a maritime director slash information
Information.
minister,
Yeah.
that will be coming back to the U.S. Sometime in March.
In March
He's being
2023.
invited.
Right.
Kind of put some clarity around that. He's coming to be part of a forum
Yep.
that includes the French president, Emmanuel Macron. So it's going to be interesting seeing. I don't know if it's going to be an event where they're sitting on a stage and be interviewed. And we're talking about George Weah, who hasn't had a press conference in Liberia since he became president, a serious press conference, right, where questions are being bounced back and forth. This is a man who also escaped the debate. So I would love to see him come and be on that stage with Emmanuel Macron, Joe Biden, and some other African leaders to discuss world events. It's going to be very entertaining.
So I think I have a question here. I think it was posed to by this guy. He said, why, why do banks in Liberia don't usually loan money to farmers? Do you want to take it? This is Armstrong.
It's the risk. They don't feel that we can do mechanized farming and a whole lot of things in Liberia. In fact, again, please look it up. There was a bank in Florida that set aside $25 million for farming equipment for anyone, especially farmers, interested in buying machinery to help boost their farming, to help with their farming activity. Bank out in Florida, they set aside $25 million of that. So yeah, to your question, Armstrong, why in Liberia the banks do not really lend money to farmer because of the risk associated with it, which is silly. We just don't have the right things in place to make it happen. But at one time, this company in Florida was willing to do that. But I don't know if the message didn't get out in Liberia, but no one took the company out on that offer. So, and we do need mechanized farming. We got to feed ourselves in order to. It will help the economy tremendously when you stop, especially the balance of payments, because we're importing everything. Imagine a country with fertile land importing so much. It just doesn't make sense. This is why the president of Ghana was criticizing Ghanaians. He said, "You import so many tomatoes. You love tomatoes. You import so many tomatoes when you can be growing that stuff right in here." So it's not just Liberia. It's pretty much a lot of places in Africa.
All right. So we have another one. Said, "Do you know?" Oh, there's a statement. Said, "Do you know that banks employees in Liberia were secretly loaning out depositors money to their own benefit? The government is a comment in a statement. The government took serious steps to discourage that practice. I follow a few court cases." This is from San. Sorry.
I won't be surprised because of the lending practices in Liberia. But I won't also be surprised because it happens to banks here in the U.S. as well. But the problem is when you catch people, where is the rule of law? That's the thing. Look, this philosopher always said, which makes sense, right? As human beings, we will always do something that is in our best interest.
Yep.
Otherwise, if you're doing something to harm yourself, then something is wrong with you. But the reason why we try to make the system fair, to make sure that you're not just doing everything in your self-interest, is because we have laws. I'm not going to go and give my friend $100,000 who doesn't qualify for it because I know I'm going to get some type of benefit from that.
Right.
Like the $70,000 that disappear. There's something in it for. It's a very curious disappearance. Now I've seen a
Yeah.
lot of magic tricks, but that one was very curious. But there's always
Abracadabra. I think kids can say
yeah,
abracadabra.
abracadabra. You sit here, I will go upstairs, pretend nothing is happening, and then when I come down, leave the door open, 70,000 disappear. Neat trick. I love it.
Yeah.
You know,
Ah, wow.
uh,
I like that.
but please, we have laws, but are the laws being enforced equally? That's the problem. It's not. We have selective justice in Liberia, man.
Yeah. I
But
have another statement here. He said drastic reforms are probably needed in every sector of the economy. In my opinion, those reforms need to start from the top down. Absolutely, my friend.
no arguments from me on that, bro.
Yeah.
We need to reform the entire economy, and we need to start by first looking at the budget.
Yeah.
We're
And
going to
this
have
one
a
is,
show on the budget, right, Gabriel?
yes, I think that is we're doing that next week. So yeah, please do tune in
The
next week.
reform starts at the budget.
Right.
We have our budget upside down. Joe Biden said, "Don't tell me what you're going to do. Show me your budget, and I will tell you what you're going to do."
Mm.
So when you look at the Liberia's budget, we see money is being allocated to the Minister of State office. A
Yep.
ton of money. The executive getting a ton of money. When money should be allocated to education, healthcare. We're supposed to have at least around 15% of our GDP go into education, but we don't do that. There's a threshold that the World Bank, United Nations have all set. We don't follow any of that stuff. Other countries are doing it. That's why they're growing. Liberia is a strange place, my brother.
Very strange. Very
Bring some
strange.
CDC people over here. They would deny everything I'm saying. I would bring them the data. They would still deny it.
It was
Like
so
when I told
denied.
them Josh Weah was getting more money in his first 3 years than Ellen. They deny it. I give them
But
the
that's
link to the website.
that is not unique to them though. Every administration will have their own like the praise singers that you will print, and it's just something that baffles me. You will give them the data, the number to them, and they will still trying to run laps around you and say they deny certain things. But
But the
yeah.
U.S. ambassador, not the U.S. ambassador, the U.S. government put it. If you go to the Congressional Research Office website, it's there in terms of Liberian government officials are paying what they call conflict actors. They're paying people to get on social media and create this kind of conflict. So it's just a small handful of people that's actually doing it. It's not, a majority of the population.
Right.
But they're paying people. The government officials are paying these conflict actors to do that. It's in the U.S. government, the Congress Research Office, Congressional Research Office papers as well.
Yeah. All right. So that's it. This is a comment from Joe Monyu. He said the Land Commission should also apply blockchain technology to reduce the duplication of land deeds as well as authentication into land transaction process. So blockchain will ensure that all parties to a transaction are notified in the event of the land sale. It removes duplicity from the process. This is another person who buy
Joe's right.
blockchain
No
from.
argument from me on that one.
Yeah,
Joe's
yeah.
absolutely correct.
All right. All right. So with that being said, let's jump into the last topic that we have on our agenda here. So the last thing we have on our agenda here today is, are these sanctions having an economic impact? So the sanction that happened, that sanction CFA's bill, and what was the other guy name? I forgot. I forgot.
McGill, Bill, and
Miguel.
Cephas.
Exactly. Whether those sanctions are having any economic impact since then. To your point, I mean, from your perspective, what do you think what do you think these sanctions, those sanctions, that specific sanction that took place is having any economic uh, impact, whether it's from a positive standpoint or negative?
The sanctions are not really meant to have an economic impact in Liberia because Liberia is not sanctioned. This is the Globe Mag sanction on individuals. So it's not going to have an economic impact. If it was a sanction on a country, like how the U.S. has sanction on Iran, how the U.S. have sanctions on Russia, how the U.S. have sanctions on Venezuela and Maduro, then you can say, let's take an analysis on whether it's having an economic impact. This sanction is only meant to penalize individuals for rampant corruption. It's not meant to have an economic impact as a whole on the country, right? But on the other hand, the impact that it's having is these individuals can no longer influence or divert money within the system, which is what they were allegedly doing, right? So McGill, for whatever little shenanigan he was up to, he can no longer do that because he was the same one that got on the air and said, even if I'm stealing money, am I not using it here in the country? One of the silliest statements I've ever heard from a public official, kind of justifying theft. But yeah, the sanction is not meant to hurt the country because, in fact, you have 5 individuals in Liberia that are on the sanctions list, right? You have Prince Johnson, Varney Sherman, and the other 3 guys we just mentioned.
Right.
But then you also have 12 companies in Liberia that are on the sanction, including companies that are doing business with terrorist organization, Hezbollah. These are SDGT, specially designated global terrorists. That's the sanction the U.S. have put on these individuals.
Right.
Which, if I'm Boyka or Cummings running for presidency, I should be paying close attention to those entities.
Yeah.
Close attention to those entities. Because Liberia is like the only country where you have this number of businesses that are on the specially designated global terrorist watch because they deal with a terrorist. The financier for Hezbollah, his name, I think, is Mohammed Ansu or something like that. Pay close attention to that because that is very, very, very disconcerting, right? But the sanction, to answer the question, Gabriel, I'll swing it over to you. It's not meant to have a negative impact on the economy. It's just meant to put those individuals in check and make sure they cannot, travel to the U.S. They cannot do certain things and get them out of the system. But Varney Sherman and Prince Johnson are still in the system. So,
and I agree with you. And I think you said exactly that. That's exactly what it's supposed to do. So the sanction wasn't on the country now, and I think as we keep, when it initially happened, we kept saying there's a possibility. I think that they alluded to there's a possibility that more sanctions could come. And I would say that, and I always say that the reason why the Minister of Finance wasn't on that list is because if you sanction him, it would have been like a direct sanctioning of the country because he moves the country money around. So you sanctioning him would have done that. But no, the impact, you're right, the sanction wasn't on the country. It was just those individuals. Now, as opposed to for why the previously sanctioned individuals, the Sherman and Prince Johnson are still in the within the government. That's a broader discussion for another time. But you're right about that.
But Gabriel, one thing real quick before I swing it back to you.
Right.
But when you have, and this is something that is so important, I want people to really pay attention to this, right? This is so important. But when you have someone like McGill now trying to run for Senate in Maghibie County, and you still have Prince Johnson and Nimba and Varney Sherman in Grand Cape Mount. The problem is because they cannot touch U.S. money, when U.S. send foreign aid to Liberia, these guys cannot touch it.
They cannot touch it.
If they end up
directly,
if they end up being involved in a project that includes U.S. money, the county is going to suffer. So people need to pay close attention in terms of election. Who you put in your Senate or your representative. If you put an individual that is sanctioned in the Senate for your county, that individual cannot go and petition the U.S. for foreign aid. They can't do that because the U.S., first of all, they can't travel to the U.S. But then secondly, the U.S. is not going to but provide funding to any project that they have their hands on. So people need to pay close attention to that. So there will be some economic impact to sanctions if you're making your senator that is on a sanction list, if you're keeping someone who's on a sanction list as your senator because they cannot touch US money.
Yeah.
So that, just kind of want to put some clarity around the economic impact of sanctions. So counties can be impacted economically from sanctions if the senator is on a sanction list,
yeah,
and he wants to get involved in a project. But if the finance minister, President Weah, President Weah, the finance minister, gets sanctioned, now that's going to be a huge blow to the country.
Yeah.
Because the finance minister got hands in pretty much everything. So he gets sanctioned, you're done. You got to get him out of there quick.
Yeah. No, I think you're right about that. And for me, the only thing I keep looking forward to, and I hope this would have happened, was that in addition to those sanctions and their removal, that the the Senate or the House of Representative or whatever you want to call it, the government would have filed an extensive investigation in addition to that, and make sure that some of those funds that were identified and those entities that were identified within that list of sanctions, they would have gone after those people to recover some of those penny and bring those, in addition to that, bring those individual, bring them to court, take them to court and let them be able to testify their involvement in those entities, and make sure you go after them for that money. But we just, as we in every government, we just remove them and we say, hey, these guys, we remove them, and everybody just went quiet. And sometimes this is what baffles me about the opposition too. Sometimes I don't like talking politics, but sometimes like common sense isn't common. I know we say common sense isn't common, but in stuff like that, this is where you're supposed to not just put a memo out or whatever it is, but raise your voice in terms of making sure that these people are brought to justice. And not only that, they ensure that the capital, the money that were identified in there, that you open an investigation, even if you have to pay an investigative journalist to be able to dig in some of these things, to be able to find out and bring those evidence to court and indict these individuals, that they will be able to recover some of this funds. You do that. That's what, at an opposition, whether you're in opposition, but as a well, yes, opposition, as somebody in opposition who's wanting to set an example. Eventually, when you get into power, you demonstrate that from the beginning. So when these people see it, they say, hi, if this person get into power, this is what they're going to be. But only thing we kept seeing was memos here, memos there, talk here, talk here. And that was it. That's where everything in Liberia, people just talk and they just die down, pass, gone, forgotten. Those guys just made their way clean. And that's why I'm emboldening them to now say they want to go run for representatives and senators in different other counties. Yeah.
But Gabriel, if you look in the statement from the U.S. government when they sanctioned Prince Johnson and Vonnie Sherman, if you look in that statement from December, I think, of last year, 2021, if you look in that statement, it says right in the statement that Prince Johnson was laundering money for government officials. He was laundering money. He was getting money from government officials, trying to clean it and make it look as if the money that he was sending back to them was, some money they earned. It's in the statement. So let me ask you, Gabriel, if the U.S. Department of Justice found out that a senator was laundering money with federal government officials over here, what do you think the U.S. Department of Justice would have done?
They would have opened an investigation.
They would have taken whatever thing, open an investigation, and more than likely indict that senator. But like you just said, it just went right under the rug. It says so in the U.S. government report. Go to the U.S. treasury.gov website, put in Liberia, and you will see the global Magnitsky sanction against Prince Johnson. And it says so right there. He was actually laundering money with Liberian government officials. Then you wonder why you didn't get the MCC money. You score 52% on a corruption index in the MCC, which is right above the median, right? The median. When you have countries like Sierra Leone scoring around 80%, 78%, you have other countries scoring 98%. It's like the World Cup we just watched.
Right.
The third place team is expected to get $27 million. The fourth
Right.
place team, the first place team is going to get what, like around 40 million. Second
Yep.
place team get like around 30 something million or so.
Yep. Yep.
Second place team, third place team get around 27 million. Not everybody that went to the World Cup or passed the MCC going to automatically get money. They're going
Right.
to give money to the top 5 countries or so, or 6 or 7 countries or so. You score right around the median on the corruption, which is a hard qualification. You have to do well in the corruption index. You got 3 top government officials being sanctioned. Then you wonder why you're not getting any money. So
yeah, and I mean, there's sanction thing. Sometimes when I look at the House of Senate, I mean the Senate and the the we kind of lost Larry there. Hopefully he'll be able to join us. So for me, when I look at the uh, you know yeah, we kind of lost you there. When I look at the House, the Senate, right? I look at the Senate and the House of Representatives, right? Like sometimes I think, if there is anybody within that government that have any, excuse my language, any balls at all to be the outlier, to say if everybody's going this way, let me be the one who launched an investigation. Let me be the one who just see to it that these individuals will not just get away with the money of Liberian people, and see to it that I follow this thing through until it is exhausted. But there hasn't been now one person, even with the case with Prince Johnson and Vonnie Sherman, not one person to say in our government to say, let me raise an investigation, right? Let's really look into these people and make sure that we don't have them in our government. And the same thing with this current guy that got sanctioned. I expected somebody to not forget the opposition. We know they may just come and talk and trying to gain political points for voters, but as somebody who took an oath to represent the country, the best economic interest of the country, to be sitting there and knowing these things and not do anything at all, I think it baffles me to a level that I cannot fathom in terms of Liberian politics. And this is what baffles me.
it's Liberia. But you see how Alex came in and immediately he sanctioned me and kicked me right out. Let me give it to Alex, man. He didn't get a chance to
Alex,
chime in. Go ahead, Alex. How
welcome
you
back.
doing there, buddy?
I was listening. Just came to say hello to them.
Yeah, you sound far away from the phone. I don't know.
Oh, I'm far away from the phone.
Where is Alex's number 1 fan? She's not here today.
No, she's not. I don't see her on here today. We can hear you now. Now it's better.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I just stepped in to say hi.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I'm Martin. You were talking about the sanction thing.
Yes.
Regarding the companies.
Yep. The economic impact, whether there's any economic impact on the sanction.
On the companies that were sanctioned, that were listed by the U.S. government.
Either the individual
and
or the company.
They're still operating in Liberia.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I just passed in to say hello.
Yeah.
That's all.
Okay. Okay. Well, welcome. It's good to have you here. I think that was
nice to see you, bro.
Yeah, that was the last thing on our list. But before we wrap up, guys, there is I wanted us to start with that, but I think we just jump into the topic that we had. There is I think you guys heard about it. $70,000 that went missing within the ANC, and there's been a lot of speculation. In addition to that, of the what is called the rally called the We Tire rally, right? The money that's supposed to fund that was supposedly taken by a driver. There has been speculation that this guy was actually an insider who was working with the another former with the CDC, but they didn't know that he was with the CDC. And up to now, I don't think anybody know what the money is, whether they were able to recover it. The rally was held, I think, earlier today. I didn't follow it. I didn't see any video on it. So, but what do you guys think about that $70,000 going missing and the speculation around it? Now, please, if you want to take your gloves out, take your gloves out. If you want to tread carefully, do that. But I want to hear you guys opinion about
Let's
that.
get time to Alex. Let's
Yeah,
get time to
Alex,
Alex.
can you hear us? He gone.
Nah, but that money is just a clear indication that some people surrounding the Alex Cummings team looking out for themselves.
Mm.
So, but again, it goes back to when we're talking banking and finance, we know every institution have operational risk. You always have the risk of individuals who are surrounding you who are not looking out in your best interest. You know, like Costa said, when he and his team organized their rally, they organized a protest. Rally is to just kind of boost somebody's morale up, unlike a protest where you are there to kind of state your grievance and petition the government.
Right.
That's why, you know, there's some sort of a disjointed message between having a rally and then having a protest, but that's another story. But like when Costa said he did his protest, on average, I think it cost him like around maybe 11,000 or less. So setting aside 70,000 for this event just kind of seemed enormous, but yeah, people absconded, made away with that money. And I think those two guys are in cahoots. I highly suspect they're in cahoots.
Yeah. That's what everybody's saying as well.
Highly suspect they're in cahoots.
Yeah, when I heard that about $70,000, I said, "Wow, that's a lot of money."
Yeah.
Yeah, $70,000. I mean, what was that money for? Is that for? I don't know what it's for, but $70,000 to organize a rally. I mean,
So for me, when I heard it, I thought, so this is my take on it, and I'm glad you clarified the difference between a rally and a protest. You know, I'm glad you actually mentioned that. I thought, you know, in as much as people were calling it a rally, I thought it was a protest. It's supposed to be a protest in terms
It's a
of to
protest. It's
say,
not a rally.
right? It's supposed to be a protest to say, you know, we're tired, we're done suffering, like we're really suffering in this country. But also, because it is a protest now, you state your demands as to the things, because you say you're tired of suffering, you're supposed to go there and state demands as to what you would like to see happen within the country, right? And you make those demands known, then you can say it's a protest, right? That's what I thought it was. But I keep hearing people say it's a rally, which is just, if you want to rally, you can just, anybody can get on social media and do that thing, and like, you can't just go gather people and say you're doing a rally. If you say it's a protest, then I'll say you can create a list of demands that you want people to see, you want to see happen, because you're making a demand to say, you're making a statement to say that you're tired of suffering, right? But in addition to that, I would also say this in defense, that yes, all of us here know the suffering that has been taking place in our country since this administration took over. Even the later stages of the previous administration, right? It started happening, right? But it has exacerbated in this administration to a level that when you guys have family back there, I do too. You talk to anybody in our country, they tell you, I mean, think tough here. We just managing, right? So I do agree there is, in as much as people keep saying that is a lot of money that was to do a rally or protest. I don't think you can put any amount of figure on a voice of somebody making their voice known. Even if this was a one person showing up at that rally or protest, you cannot put a monetary figure on it to make sure that that person get their voice heard. But the only thing I have with that is that you should have properly termed it a protest. Not only should you properly term it a protest, you're supposed to come with a demand, because you made a statement from the beginning that said you're going to come with a demand that you say you're tired of suffering. So people are not expecting you to say, what are the things that are happening in the country that are making you tired of suffering? You're supposed to list them that you would like to see change, and then make those things within the rally or protest, right? But that never happened. But in terms of the monetary figure that was placed on that, I don't think you can put any monetary amount figure on the life of somebody. There are millions of people in our country who may never self-actualize their dreams because of what is happening here. That is 6 years that we're about to blow by. That's somebody, imagine you coming out of college right away, 5, 6 years of your life just gone by, nothing doing, right? You cannot put a monetary value on that. What I think people are doing, they should be taking the Liberian people seriously. And that's the only thing I disagree with. I didn't like about this protest or rally or however you call it. You're supposed to state your claim, state that claim to whoever you want to address it to the right people, and make sure that your voice are heard, but not just go say you're going to gather people and just for the sake of gathering and not making anything substantially known to the people. So that's my disparity, that indifference that I have. It should have been stated, the claim should have been made, but on the other hand, I don't think we can put a monetary value on in terms of somebody making their voice heard. Yeah. So that's my that's where I stand with that.
I don't know the rationale that led to it being called a rally. Why they calling it a rally or a gathering? I don't know whether they wanted to conform to the Constitution, because the Constitution guarantees the right of the citizen to assemble anytime they want to assemble. Probably if they are calling a protest, the government people is going to try to make it not work, or maybe the international community or the ECOWAS and people would have brought them to the table to kind of have a conversation. So probably they're trying to look for a route which conform to the Constitution that says people have but I mean, politics is politics. You want to come to politics, you be prepared to come to politics. When CDC was in opposition for 12 years, CDC acted like the opposition party. They kept the government feet to the fire.
Right.
They demonstrated when they had to demonstrate. There was,
Exactly.
there was anti-corruption demonstration. There was, write-ups here and there. There was, demonstration. And one of the things that led to the army people and the police going into the CDC headquarters, that led to one death at that time. So the CDC kept, Madam Salif's feet to the fire. So if you think things are going into the country, I mean, we've seen, people should get away from this whole mindset that, oh yeah, Liberia have war, so we're scary, we think war will come again. When you talk about war crime code, they say, oh, war will come again. What does war crime have to do with bringing war back? What does a demonstration, other people have had demonstration in the country. Teachers have demonstrated, medical people have demonstrated. COP had demonstrations 2 different times. So what's this fear about somebody thinking that, oh, we have demonstration in the country, oh, war will come? No, demonstration doesn't bring war. But the thing is, governments do not understand easy. So you have to shake tables, if I must speak. It doesn't mean that you're trying to cause insurrection in the country. It doesn't go there. Nobody wants to go to the Oakley Pass. But again, it should be a demonstration. So when it's a demonstration, it's a demonstration. People rallying, people demonstrating for what they feel, and their rights are guaranteed. So I don't know what, but then this issue of money business comes in again. Money got lost, and I don't know what that money was for. Was it because it has to be cash?
Right.
Now, was it meant to distribute to some people, or what it was for? And they got. And I read a lot of things on the social media. They meant tired to suffering. So you see, you're having a rally that says we tired suffering. So the drivers too tired suffering. But I don't know the reason. I've been busy. Like I told you, I was traveling for work, so I've been busy. So I really haven't followed the issues. I don't know what the result. Larry, is there any feedback from Liberia I don't know whether it is rally or demonstration, whatever it is.
I think the
And
only
then
thing I
before
saw,
you,
someone posted something. I don't know if one of the chats saying that Cummings's bodyguard was arrested with a gun at the scene.
Yeah, I heard about that too.
oh
Yeah, I
my
think I
God.
saw something like that. So I'm not sure why there would be guns at a rally slash protest, but that was what I heard. But you know, I'm not
But
I'm not sure.
another
Mhm.
thing I thought was wrong with the rally from the beginning was it should have been a united front. It should have been
Ah,
the
ah,
entire opposition. It should have been the Unity
ah.
Party, the ANC. It should have been a united front. When Nyombli Kanga led a demonstration, she led a demonstration to the election commission for a particular purpose, for a situation that had to do with the party, and putting the election commission to check. And of course, that led to some results. Immediately, a day or two after the election commission issue, now their case is in court
Mhm,
and it's moving because of that demonstration.
mhm.
That demonstration, other people supported that demonstration though. But now that because that demonstration was just for that purpose, this particular demonstration, this December 17th coin with tire should have been the entire opposition. But when you have saying it's a CPP, where is the CPP? The CPP is probably made of 1.1.5 parties.
Mhm.
ANC plus a
Half
faction of Liberty Party.
right.
So where is the conglomeration of political forces that are supporting this? So you saw that from the beginning of the organization, I put other political heavyweights were pulling out already because they felt that this thing was one-sided and one person was trying to use this as a means of getting some political capital.
Mhm.
So it was already diluted in the beginning, and so we let people be serious in Liberia, man. We say the government are doing this, the government doing this, the government this, the government that. We complain about the government, and we were under the people who are in opposition. Then they're not doing the things that they're supposed to be doing. That who, I mean, that's who do we trust again? I don't know. We don't trust the government, and the opposition is not acting in the way that the people will trust the opposition. So I don't know where we're heading to.
But Alex, you
All
nailed
right.
it. It was called a rally because it was meant for self promotion of one individual.
Mhm.
If it was a protest, it would have involved all of the. It wasn't going to be party based. It was going to be pretty much bring their people out, and we're protesting against an injustice, or we're protesting against a specific thing. But it wasn't meant to be a protest. That's why you had people there wearing T-shirt and so with pictures of one individual on it, because that's what it was meant. That's why they were referring to it as a rally, but trying to pass it off as a protest
Protest. Yeah.
for some injustice against the masses. So
Right.
they were trying to kind of confuse people, saying, "Hey, we're doing a rally. You cannot have a rally against any justice. It's just an oxymoron. You can't do
It-
that. It's nonsense.
Thank
You,
you.
you can
Right.
have a rally to promote an
Right.
individual cause. So they call it a rally, but trying to kind of do some backdoor definition. And supporters of the organization would come out, they would make the argument, they would bend the laws of protest and argument and protest and rallies. They would bend the laws just to kind of fit their definition. But
Mhm.
I don't know. I didn't follow it. Just when someone messaged me saying that, hey, individual was caught with a gun there, kind of grabbed my attention because I wasn't sure the purpose of having a gun there. But I really didn't follow it because I didn't think it was going to address. Um, I didn't see the end result, what it was meant to do. I didn't see the end result.
Exactly,
So
exactly, and this is why I agree with you guys on that too. And I will be transparent here. I am a supporter of the ANC, but for me, I like to walk not just a fine line, but if as I always tell people, I'm from the bush, so I don't like to beat around the bush, right? I No, seriously, you call a spade a spade. You know, like you'd rather tell somebody the truth than sit there and lie to them, and that lie lead them into something that they're supposed to be what they could have moved away from. Alex, you mentioned, you guys mentioned something. If this was a united thing that was specifically targeting, they say, the economy, the people are suffering in the economy, and you want to stage something to bring awareness to that because of this administration. If I were in the ANC, Gabriel Carter, in addition to doing that, I would have extended an invitation to the other political party, whether you're in the CPP or not, because this is not just about the CPP. This is about the suffering of the Liberian people. Like they said, they were tired of suffering. This is not just people within the ANC who are tired of suffering, or within the CPP who are tired of suffering. You're supposed to send an invitation. I would send an invitation to you, Alex, if you were in the Unity Party, and say, hey, we're staging this protest or rally protest, of the things that are happening within the economy, the failure within the economy. We would like to extend an invitation to you at such and such time. This is when it's going to happen. I will send an invitation to all the political parties within the opposition for them to show up at that. Whether you now take on that invitation to show up, that is the onus is now put upon you to say, hey, at least I know I extended that invitation to you. So in another word, this is saying that this is bigger than me. This is bigger than the party that I'm in. This is now at the country level, right? Because not only people in the CPP are suffering, everybody from Botuo to Bonican to whatever little village is being impacted by the action of this administration. So if
So
you're doing
tomorrow,
something like
the
that,
United Party. I mean, next time the United Party will have their own retire rally.
and that's
The
that
other
is
party will have their tire rally.
and that
Everybody will
is
be
the
serving us something.
problem. We
That's
are not
absolutely
Everybody will have start
united.
having a split up rallies.
We're not united, and that's the reason why some of us just take a backseat and just watch from the. Like, we're not united. Like, you should stop playing with the Liberian people. Stop it. Like, you're
But
gonna stay.
Gabriel, that's why these days when you talk to people, when talk to people in Liberia or gatherings, people will say, okay, yeah, we agree that the government not doing right by the people. But then the opposition that we're depending on to come into, they too having all these different missteps.
Yeah,
So you tell us now which direction will go,
I
right?
expected them
Which
to see
direction will
that.
go?
Right, I expected
And
to see.
you're not giving the people hope. You're not giving them something to look up to. And with all these, different, then you have rally, you bring $70,000 cash, then somebody steals 70,000. I mean, it kills the whole momentum of the whole thing. If the momentum was there at all in the first place,
As
so
I
I don't
said,
know.
I don't disagree. I don't think you can put and I'll continue to say that. I don't think you can put a monetary value to somebody making their voice heard, or somebody that is disenfranchised making their voice heard. You cannot put a money that the 70,000, the life of any Liberian, whether you were born in poverty, is worth more than $70,000. So that money being disappearing or whatever it is, I don't care about that. Whether it was too much or not. People say it's too much. I believe that is chump change compared to the impact of somebody making their voice heard, that this is what is happening in the country. This is what is happening to me. So, as I keep saying, and I like to tell people this story, I will say it and I'll end. Imagine somebody being born in 1970, not 10 years old. When they were 10 years old, the coup happened. When they were 19 years old, the war happened, the Civil War. Another 14 years, they just did nothing in the during the entire span of the Civil War. The war ended. You have failure upon failure administration. That's somebody entire life almost in their 40s or 50s with nothing going for them, right?
But
At this level,
Gabriel, just to a point, I gotta run. Gentlemen, thank you for the show. I gotta run.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
At this
okay.
level, if you are in the opposition, you're doing something like that. Those are some of the things that should be in your head. There are entire generation who have their life just in front of them, flush. If you're doing something like that, those are the things you're supposed to be thinking about. This is not about me anymore. This is not about, oh, because I belong in this party, I'm just going to stay in my little group here, or because I belong. I will send an invitation to you. Whether politically we agree or not, whether we have different political ideology, but the fact that is, this is bigger than me. This is bigger than you yourself. This is about solving the economic challenges of the country. So I will send that invitation to you, whether you decide to show up. that is upon you. And we cannot put a monetary value on that. This is to raise the voice of the common person in Liberia to say, this is the economic challenge that is happening, that is impacting each and every one of us, regardless of your political background, your travel background. And we want to make sure that this government is aware of it. These are the things that we think we need to have, that needs to happen in order to ameliorate some of those problems that are happening in the country, right? So the fact that it was done, put out, and nobody else show up, but just as specific, just the CPP show up, whether the invitation was, and I would say that I'm not aware whether the invitation was sent to the other political party. I'm not aware of that, but I think it should have been planned, labeled properly. You're going to do something, don't shy away from it. Say, this is what I'm going to do, and do it. Don't shy away from it. But that never happened. And now, in addition to that, there's money that was missing. So it kind of make people to think this was a joke, but it should have been properly attended to and properly labeled. And for me, as I said, I'm a ANC leaning. I don't in as much that I want to see. I know I think Mr. Cummings has the ability to transform the country. I don't care less. I care less about politics. I work in the private sector, so I say what I say. Anybody want to come after me, please do so at your own risk.
Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah.
All right, so let's wrap it up. Call it a day. For my closing, I don't have a whole lot to add, except the opportunity to protest would have been when there was shortages of rice on the market, the increase in the price of the staple food, rice. Those are clear issues to be to protest about. You see that happening all over the world. People are protesting on those kind of issues. And Jimmy Eastman makes a good point. They didn't think it through completely. And like he said, the strategy was weak. I agree with that. But like in anything, there's always a lesson learned. So take this, go back to the drawing board, and come up with a better strategy next time. But I really appreciate the folks for being here. My man Jimmy Eastman for his comments, Emmanuel Jackson, Joe Munyu, always love talking to you, bro. Samuel Moore for being here, Bill Carson. Like you guys coming in here, following us, making your comments. Hassan, my man Hassan, love it when you're here as well. And Phoebe, we thank you guys for joining us Saturday to kind of take a look at some of the pressing issues in Liberia and listening to us, just share some of our experiences and ideas with you. So that's my closing. You guys have a wonderful weekend. Gabe, I swing it over to you.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I enjoyed the conversation today. I think this is probably the first that we try. We cover 4 topics in different areas, and we were able to do it. I think we went over time, way over time. And we're supposed to do this within an hour and a half, but I think we were able to talk about those things in detail. As we said, I think you mentioned too, we have the budget coming out next Saturday, right? So please do join us for that. And for me, I don't think I said everything I needed to say in this whole time we were here, the 2 hours. So, but as we always say, regardless of what part of the political aisle you think we're on, we are all Liberians, and everything we talk about here, as we always say here, is to elevate the level of conversation that we're having to help push our democracy a little bit further than when we left it. So every time we have conversation about these things, that's what we're trying to do here. So it doesn't look at parties or this party or in this one or this one. We look at things objectively from an economic standpoint and trying to bring some sense to that. So this is what we always do here. And as we always say, we're all Liberians. We hope that you join us next Saturday on the budget, and we look forward to see you next week. Until then, enjoy your Saturday and the rest of your weekend.
Take care, Gabriel. See you guys later. Bye-bye.
Bye. All right, let me wrap up here. Bear with me.
We are Liberians. Liberia is our home. Liberian people. Either you may say all we want. Liberia.